Welcome, everybody, to your weekly vibe check, your weekly Frax check. I am your host, Capital K. And this week, before we jump right in, make sure you smash that subscribe button, tap that like button, and join the conversation at Flywheel DeFi on Twitter and Telegram. And also, go check out our brand spanking new website, flywheeldefi.com, for all your Frax 101 content to the latest product updates. Head on over there after you finish this episode. Speaking of this episode, guys, this episode has been a very painful one to put together. Hence, I've dubbed it Darkest Before Dawn, FraxCheck number 51 for August 23rd to September 5th. And I'm just going to dive us right into the thick of it. And here, you'll see the biggest pain point for the week is actually we are down another 7% in our Frax supply. We are currently at 746 million total Frax supply out there. And this, again, yet represents another low for the year. We we were holding on to that 1 billion, like that tres comma club for as long as we could. And now we've dropped down to only 2 commas. And let me just tell you, the pain doesn't stop there. Unfortunately, we got to move on and check the peg. In the dashboard, we saw that the peg was 0.999 to as low as 0.997. But when we go into the markets and we do a swap, note here that we no longer use the curve Frax BP pool to do the swap. We now started using the 1 inch as the swap venue instead. And you see here on 1 inch, the exchange rate for 100 million Frax is 0.992. Now, granted, again, like I said, this is not a exchange rate that we want to see. Obviously, we want to see this higher, but it's what we got right now. Another note that I want to be fully transparent about is for the curve pool, the Frax BP pool, it is highly imbalanced right now with almost 80-20, meaning 80% Frax and 20% USDC. So there needs to be some rebalancing done there as well. Now, moving on to our balance sheet, we should review that. And here we saw that our assets are 881.8 million. Liabilities are 815 million. And balance, which is the difference between assets and liabilities, is 66 million. And this 66 million is actually a drop of 21% from our previous balance of like in the 80s. That indicates to us that the assets actually decreased a lot more than liabilities did. And we see here those numbers, right? Asset decreased by 8.2%, liabilities dropped by 6.8. Now, what is interesting though is the lock liquidity increased over this 2-week span, whereas assets still decreased in total. So that's where we are today in the Frax stablecoin product. Moving on, we have our two last KPI for the stablecoin product, which is our collateralization and decentralization ratios. Here, we've seen a pretty much flat collateralization ratio for the past, I want to say, almost a month or 2 months now for the collateralization ratio. And on the right-hand side, we have the decentralization ratio. And here we actually are bumping for the last, I think, about a month. We've been bumping up to 26.6% here. We were in that low there, as you can see on the graph. But for those listening, we got as low as like the high teens here. So this is great to see that we hit a 26.6% decentralization rate. Again, this concludes the Frax product portion of this episode. Now we move on to Frax BP, aka liquidity as a service. Here we saw a minor drop of TVL of 2.7%, down to 438 million. And for the month of August, this same pool facilitated 69 million in trading volume, which represents about a 16% utilization rate. Again, not great, but kind of on par with the market kind of decreasing and bleeding down with volume at lows across the board. Here we compared all of the Frax related pools in on curve. You see here we have the Frax BP, the Frax 3 CRV, and the Frax PP. And when you add all of them together, we are actually still 2.7x the size of Curve's native 3 pool. So we are definitely still maintaining that ratio above a 2x of the 3 pool. That's what I like to see. Another interesting point is Frax 3 CRV, which used to be the flagship AMO, it has now dropped to a new low of 10 million. And I would imagine that pool just kept bleeding lower and lower. This will be the last time I'm including the Frax 3 CRV. So I just wanted to kind of put it out there for the folks who are paying attention. So moving forward, I'm only going to be reporting on the Frax BP and the Frax PP, which is Frax and USDP. All right, moving on to the favorite product of ours, which is, or at least my favorite, the FrxETH. Here we have a count of 257,659 FrxETH in total supply, represent that increase of 1.8% over the last 2 weeks. Now, where are all of these FrxETH hanging out? Well, let me tell you. We have 74% of them in the FrxETH staking pool, earning that sweet, sweet native yield. Then we have 24% hanging out in the FrxETH curve pool to facilitate that liquidity. And there are 2 new additions to this dashboard that we see is the FrxETH and the FrxETH, which represents 2 and 1% respectively. And lastly, we have the else. This is the FrxETH that is in the ether, and that represents 3%. This is the, I guess you would call it the monetary premium that's being out there right now. All right. Aside from that, FrxETH is still a stable coin, so we got to check the peg. Now, this is the kind of exchange rate we want to see for our stable coins. You have FrxETH here, swapping 3,500 FrxETH for ETH gets us a 0.9984 exchange rate. Very, very beautiful exchange rate. Now, even though the Curve FrxETH pair pool has a slight imbalance of 72.5 and 27.5% FrxETH to ETH. And then let's move over to our competitive landscape. And here is the other bad news that I wanted to share. We are actually now, we lost market share. We lost 3.5% market share this week, dropping down to 2.2%. Worst of all, we were actually flipped by Binance staked ETH. So now we are no longer 4th in the race. We are now 5th in the race. Talk about adding, salt to injury. But one welcoming sight to see is we have Eigenlayer showing up on the charts here at 0.85% market share and rocking a 162 million in TVL. We are big fans of Eigenlayer. We've recently interviewed the founder of Eigenlayer. So if you have yet to see that, go check out our podcast with the founder, Shram. And Shram was like amazing on this pod. And you absolutely must go and listen and learn more. And then, but let's go back to the FrxETH here. But one area that FrxETH is still on the top, and that is the yield department. All right, guys, we are still pulling in a 4.5% APY on FrxETH, and this is based off of DeFi Llama's rankings here. So this is not anything built by the team. And you see in closest as second place was Stakewise at 3.94%, Lido at 3.7%, and Rocket Pool at 3.5%. So we are definitely a cut above the rest. Now, on our own dashboards of the fax.frax.finance URL, you can see the FrxETH chart where we've compared what it what the earnings will look like for 1,000 ETH staked with SFraxETH versus STETH versus RETH versus CBETH. And here, SFraxETH is over a 6-month period, earns 44% more than Rocket Pool ETH and 26% more than Lido's STETH. And we're not cherry picking. We're actually looking at a long time horizon of 6 months here. So this is not just a quick snapshot. This is actually actual historic performance, not projections. All right, guys, that is it for the FrxETH product. Moving on to, I like to call this the middle child, the FPI. And FPI has been fairly quiet for this past 2 weeks. So nothing much to report here. The supply is 84.6 million. Annual inflation index is 3.3%. FPI is still above the peg by 17 bips. The treasury is unchanged at 92 million. And the convex and FPI Frax is 37% of the treasury value, with the equity portion 3.7 million. That's it. No changes across the board for FPI. Moving on, we have our first sub protocol, the Frax Lend. Here we saw a decrease in TVL down to 214 million. We also saw a decrease in borrowing down to 59.3 million, representing a 68% utilization rate, meaning you take the amount borrowed divided by the amount of Frax available to borrow. We see that we only have a 68% utilization rate, which is down 8% from 2 weeks ago. We like to see the utilization rate around 75, low 80s. Like that seems healthy, but right now it obviously is not. And I think a large portion of that is just coming from folks taking leverage off, whether it be de-risking completely or at the very least removing leverage. Now, here this month, though, in August, we saw a lot of liquidations, which we'll get to a little bit later in the episode. But moving on to the second sub protocol, also the last leg to complete the DeFi Trinity, our Frax swap. I like to call this swap the DEX that nobody talks about or nobody knows about, but it's actually pushing out pretty major volume for its TVO. It has a 63.8 million TVO, slight drop of 6% over the last 2 weeks, but it has facilitated $57 million in volume. That is a 90% utilization rate. It's one of the most efficient pools, one of the across the whole DEX, like not just one specific pair, but across the whole DEX. And we kind of love to see that. And there is no surprise that the top pair for the Frax swap is the FXS Frax pair. For the last 7 days, it's done about 6.5 million in volume. Normally, I see this thing as high as like 15 million for the last 7 days for this specific pair, but obviously this has been a slow week for FXS or for Frax swap here specifically. Now, moving on, we have our profitability, and here's where we're going to take a look at the revenues and the profits of some of the product suites. Here, let's start out with a snapshot of all the AMOs. We have the total AMO size of 695 million, and the Curve AMO is 504 million, obviously the largest portion. Then we have the Liquidity AMO at 52, the Lending AMO at 105, and the Investor AMO at 34. So totaling that all up comes to about 695 million. Now, with that, though, let's take a look closer into the Frax Lend. But before we do that, I just want to make a public announcement that we are working on building a dashboard for the Curve AMO to do more proper reporting on both the rewards as well as the bribe expenses. So stay tuned for that. But for now, let's talk about the Frax Lend AMO. Here, the Frax Lend AMO is printing it. In the month of August, the FraxLend revenue, this is real yield, generated about 116K. And on average, we do about like 29, 30K a week. So that's kind of where we got that number of 126K for the month of August. Now, on the liquidation front, that was where the lion's share of the FraxLend revenue for the month of August came in. We put in about $227,000 in revenue for liquidation fees over this last August month. That is just crazy. That is astronomical. Great for the protocol, not great for the the folks who got liquidated, of course. So definitely be safe out there, stay safe out there. And then we have actually a nice revenue bump from our FPI, which gives us $72,000 for the month of August. Thank you, FPI. Very, very solid contribution to the bottom line here. The VEFPI folks are definitely happy to see that. And guys, with that last bit, that is it for FraxCheck number 51. As the name suggests, it is darkest before dawn. And this is what Dave has said. Like, this is what the bottoming process looks like. This is the pain that we look like. Not only did we lose a bunch of supply on our flagship product, the Frax stablecoin, down 7%. We're into 750. We can't even crack 750 million in supply. Second dagger to hit us is the balance. We used to have over 100 million in excess balance for the balance sheet, but now we're actually down to only 66. So very, very much pain there. Then the last kind of salt to injury is we not only lost market share for our FrxETH product, but we actually got flipped by Binance's staked ETH. So those are the three pain points and for the week for me, putting together this Frax check for you guys. And yeah, like it's like Dave says, this is what bottoming process looks like. It's darkest before dawn. And I would love to hear your guys' comments, input. Let's commiserate together in the comments, or better yet, join the conversation. Go to our Twitter at Flywheel DeFi and go to our Telegram at Flywheel DeFi so we can cope together. Okay, cope stronger, cope together. And make sure you smash that subscribe button to keep on getting this content and weekly updates or bi-weekly updates for FraxCheck, and just keep you guys in the loop of what's going on chain. Make sure you check out our new website at flywheeldefi.com. All right. And this is 0x capital underscore K. And I will catch you guys in 2 weeks. Peace.